Do you believe a woman can spend an entire night at her first love's apartment and then tell you nothing happened? Do you believe a husband can hear those words, fall silent for 3 seconds, and then say, "Then let's divorce"? Do you believe that the very next morning, that first love will call with a revelation that completely overturns everything? On a late July morning, 3 things happened inside this apartment. A woman came home deep in the night, a man signed divorce papers, and a phone call was about to ring, a call that would change everything. But the phone hasn't rung yet. Right now, Marcus Chen is still lying on the couch, staring at the crack in the ceiling, waiting for dawn. He doesn't know that in 7 hours, he'll be standing outside the Civil Affairs Bureau, about to hear Vera say something he never expected. He doesn't know that in 24 hours, he'll be gripping his wife's hand in the emergency room, reading a medical report with words he refuses to believe. He doesn't know that the orange stray cat that ran away will be waiting by their building entrance that very evening. But none of that has happened yet. Right now, it's 3:17 a.m., and the door lock is turning. Vera is home. The sound of the lock turning was unusually clear in the dead of night. Marcus hadn't been asleep. He lay on the couch, eyes fixed on a thin crack in the ceiling that ran from the edge of the light fixture all the way to the corner of the room, like a dried-up riverbed. The living room was dark except for the amber glow of the street lamp outside, which cut a warm trapezoid of light across the floor. The footsteps lingered in the entryway for a long time. He heard Vera change her shoes, the soft scuff of slippers against the floor, slow, as if each step were pressing into cotton. Then the dull thud of her bag landing on the shoe cabinet, the metallic rasp of a zipper, the clatter of her phone being dropped inside. Finally, light footsteps moving toward the living room. He closed his eyes, then opened them. Vera emerged from the shadows at the living room entrance. Her floral sundress was hopelessly wrinkled, the collar twisted sideways, baring one shoulder. Her hair was loose, strands sticking to her cheeks. The streetlight caught her profile, and Marcus could see the small mole at the corner of her mouth, normally a deep brown, now nearly invisible in the dim light. Still awake. Her voice was soft, carrying a deliberate calm. Marcus sat up. The couch springs groaned. He didn't turn on the light, just remained sitting in the dark, watching her. A foreign scent hit his nose, not perfume, but something like stale cigarette smoke mixed with air freshener. Her hair smelled different too, not the usual lime-scented shampoo but something sweeter, floral. "You smell like smoke," Marcus said. Vera lifted her sleeve and sniffed it. Probably, he was smoking. Who? Vera didn't answer right away. She walked to the coffee table, bent down to plug her phone into the charger, moving slowly, as if buying time. As she bent, Marcus saw a small reddish-purple mark just below her collarbone. In the dim light it was hard to make out, but he saw it. "Derek Joe." She said the name flatly, without inflection. "I went to his place last night." Something in Marcus's chest dropped suddenly, like an elevator in freefall. "You said you were working late." "Yeah." Vera straightened up, not meeting his eyes. "I worked, then I went to his place." The living room went so quiet Marcus could hear the hum of the refrigerator compressor. His hands rested on his knees, fingers slowly curling into fists. He was 32. They'd been married 3 years, together for 7. He thought he knew her well enough, the way she'd tape reminders on the fridge about his stomach medication, the way she'd pick hair out of the drain after every shower, the way she'd unconsciously twist her wedding ring when she was nervous. Right now she stood there, her left thumb turning that ring in slow circles. She was nervous too. Why? Marcus's voice scraped out of his throat, dry as sandpaper. Vera looked up at him. The streetlight caught her irises, turning them a pale amber. The mole at the corner of her mouth twitched, and her lips pressed into a thin line. "Marcus, do you remember what you said on our wedding day?" Marcus said nothing. You said that no matter what happened, you'd always let me finish speaking first. Her voice began to tremble. So I'm telling you now, nothing happened. Nothing happened between me and Derek. Do you believe me? Marcus looked into her eyes. His own reflection stared back at him from within them, tiny and misshapen, like a paper doll that couldn't stand straight. He remembered the first time he saw her in college. She'd fallen asleep at the library table, her hair spread across the spine of the Western Aesthetics reader. She was 19 then, her eyes bright as glass beads polished in a stream. They'd dated, broken up, reunited, married. 7 years, he'd thought, was enough to learn every expression on a person's face. But right now, he couldn't read hers. You spent the night at his place, he said, his tone flat as an iron sheet. Yes. Alone. Just the two of you. Yes. You came back this morning with your dress wrinkled. Vera looked down at her dress, tugged at the collar to cover her bare shoulder. Her fingers were shaking. Marcus, I told you, nothing happened. If you can't handle it, then we should. She stopped. The words stuck in her throat. Divorce, Marcus finished for her. Vera's head snapped up. The streetlight flickered across her face, and for a moment her expression went completely blank, like she'd been struck. What did you say? You said divorce. Marcus stood, taller than her by a head, his shadow falling over her entirely. That's what you were about to say, wasn't it? Vera stepped back, her hip hitting the edge of the coffee table. A glass of water wobbled, spilling a few drops. She didn't notice. Marcus, that's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Marcus's voice finally cracked, like ice splitting under pressure. You come home at 3 in the morning smelling like someone else's cigarettes and cologne, you tell me you spent the night at your ex-boyfriend's place and nothing happened, and then you give me a choice. A choice between believing you or not believing you. Between staying married or getting divorced? Vera's lips were trembling. She clutched the fabric of her dress, knuckles white. I made my choice. I chose to come home. I chose to tell you. Tell me what? That you spent a whole night at your first love's apartment and nothing happened. Marcus let out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. Vera, do you think I'm 3 years old? Vera's eyes reddened, but she didn't cry. She bit her lower lip, the mole at the corner of her mouth pulling into an odd angle. She took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling once, and when she spoke again her voice was steady. Fine. Whatever you think happened, that's what happened. Nothing I say will change your mind, right? Marcus didn't answer. Vera nodded. A small nod, like she was confirming something to herself. Then let's divorce. When she said those words, she finally let go of her dress, her shoulders dropping an inch. If it bothers you that much, let's end it. I'm not explaining anymore. She turned toward the bedroom, her slippers scraping against the floor. At the doorway she paused, not looking back. I'll get the papers tomorrow. You can sign them. The house, your parents paid the down payment, so it's yours. I'll take half the savings. You keep the car. Marcus stood in the middle of the living room, watching her silhouette disappear into the bedroom frame. Then the door closed, the lock clicking softly. He sank back onto the couch, hands braced on his knees, palms slick with sweat. The spilled water on the coffee table was dripping onto the floor, 1 drop, 2 drops. He reached for his cigarettes, but the pack was empty, he'd smoked the last one. He crushed the pack and tossed it in the trash, then leaned back against the cushions, staring at the crack on the ceiling. It looked longer than it had earlier. At 4 a.m., muffled sobs came from the bedroom. Very soft, through the door, like wind through a crack. Marcus didn't move from the couch. He remembered last winter when Vera had a fever of 103, and he'd carried her to the ER. She'd curled up in his arms, tears soaking his neck. Her tears had been hot then. These tears, coming through the door, were cold. Like they were traveling from somewhere far away. He closed his eyes. At 5 a.m., the sky began to lighten. The curtains were open, and Marcus could see the leaves of the plane tree outside flipping their silver undersides in the breeze. Downstairs, an early riser was walking his corgi, the dog rolling on the lawn. Marcus thought of the stray orange cat they'd once taken in. They'd kept it for 3 days before it ran off. Vera had plastered "lost cat" signs all over the neighborhood until the property manager stopped her for damaging public aesthetics. She'd stood at the bulletin board wiping her eyes, telling him that cat must be hungry. The cat came back on its own, sat outside their door meowing all night. When Vera opened the door, the cat wound around her ankles 3 times. The next morning, it left again. It never came back. Marcus pressed his face into his palms. At 7 a.m., Vera's bedroom door opened. She changed into jean shorts and a white t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. Her eyes were swollen, but her expression was composed. She passed through the living room to the bathroom without looking at him. Water ran for a while. When she came out, her face was wet, a single droplet hanging from her chin. Marcus stood up. "I'm going to print the papers," he said. Vera paused mid-wipe, the towel pressed to her face. She didn't move for a long moment. Then she lowered the towel and nodded. Marcus put on his jacket and went out. In the elevator, he caught his reflection in the brushed steel panels, dark hollows under his eyes, stubble across his jaw, and a single white hair sprouting next to the mole on his chin. He didn't bother plucking it. The elevator reached the ground floor and he stepped out into sunlight that made him squint. The print shop at the neighborhood entrance had just opened. The owner was wiping dust off the counter. Marcus slid his USB drive across and said, 2 copies, double-sided. The owner glanced at the file name, then at him, but said nothing, turning to the computer. As the printer hummed to life, Marcus stood at the shop entrance watching the morning rush. A bus pulled up to the stop, disgorging people carrying breakfast bags and backpacks, heading off in different directions. Their lives were still moving normally. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from Vera, "Where did you go?" He typed back, printing the papers. 2 minutes of silence. Then she replied with a single word, "Okay." Marcus stared at that "okay" for a long time. He pocketed the phone as the owner handed him a manila envelope with the printed documents. He paid, stepped outside, and the sun was higher now, his shadow crouched at his feet like a period. The papers were spread across the coffee table, 4 sheets of A4, dense with clauses. Marcus sat on the left side of the couch, Vera on the right, a cup of cold coffee between them. Vera was wearing slippers, her toes curling and uncurling. She scanned the first page, her eyes landing on the line 4, reason for divorce. It read, irreconcilable differences. She looked up at Marcus, who was staring down, a strip of his neck exposed above his t-shirt collar, the skin tightening in the AC draft. "You filled this out?" she asked. "Yeah." Marcus didn't look up. Irreconcilable differences. Vera repeated the phrase with a bitter twist of her lips. "We've known each other 7 years, and you say, irreconcilable differences." Marcus finally raised his eyes. His gaze crossed over the papers and settled on her face. She wasn't wearing makeup today, her skin bare, a tiny red dot on the tip of her nose, probably a mosquito bite. Her eyes were even more swollen than yesterday, the rims red, but her expression was stubborn. "What would you have put instead?" Marcus asked. Vera flipped to the second page. The property division was laid out clearly, the house went to him, the car to her, the savings split evenly. Her fixed-term deposit stayed hers. The company car wasn't included. Every line was clean, precise, as if a lawyer had polished each word. "When did you get a lawyer?" Vera asked. "Yesterday afternoon." Vera nodded. That was fast. Marcus didn't respond. He had messaged attorney Wang, a mutual friend, yesterday afternoon, asking for a divorce agreement. Wang had called back asking, what happened, and Marcus had said, nothing, just draft it. Wang had paused for a long moment, then said, I'll have it for you tomorrow. He'd received the electronic version at 10 p.m. last night, read through it on his phone while Vera was still out. 3 times he'd gone over every clause, each line pricking his retinas like needles. But he'd confirmed all terms and replied, approved. "Pen," Vera said, holding out her hand. Marcus reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out his Hero 616 fountain pen. The cap was still smudged with a coffee stain from this morning. He placed it on top of the papers. The pen rolled once and stopped beside irreconcilable differences. Vera picked it up and unscrewed the cap. Her fingers trembled, the nib hovering over the signature line, not moving. "Marcus." Her voice suddenly softened. "I'm asking you one more time. Do you believe me?" Marcus looked at her. There was a shimmer of tears in her eyes, but she was holding them back. Her lips were pressed tight, the mole at their corner drawn taut. Her knuckles were white around the pen, the veins on her hand standing out faintly. "Believe you about what?" Marcus said. "That nothing happened yesterday. You spent the night at his place." "Yes." "You came back at 3 in the morning." "Yes." "What's that mark on your collarbone?" Vera glanced down at her collarbone. The reddish mark was still there. She touched it, fingers pressing the skin. "I bumped it. Against his coffee table. I went to get water and tripped." Marcus watched her touch her collarbone, fingers curled, nails short with a clear coat of polish she'd put on herself last week. She'd held her fingers up to him afterward and asked, "Do they look nice?" And he'd said, "Beautiful." She'd laughed, and that left dimple had appeared. "Why didn't you call me to come pick you up?" Marcus's voice came out raw. Vera's hand froze on her collarbone. She pressed her fingertip into the mark, the surrounding skin going white. "Because I didn't want you to see." "See what?" "See what he looked like." Vera's voice started shaking. "He was on his knees, beer cans everywhere, hugging my legs and crying, saying his dad was dying, saying he had nothing left. He grabbed my dress and wouldn't let go. It took me forever to pull away." Marcus's fists tightened on his knees. "Then why didn't you leave?" "I did leave." Vera looked up at him. "I left at 5 in the morning. He'd fallen asleep. I cleared the cans off the coffee table, wiped the floor, and I left." "Where did you go after that?" Vera's lips parted, but the word caught. She dropped her head, hair falling over her face. "I sat in the convenience store downstairs for a while, bought a bottle of water, then took a cab home." "What was the convenience store called?" "Family Mart. The one at the entrance of our neighborhood." Marcus went silent for a moment. "What time did you get home?" 7:40. "You said you were working late when you came in." "Yes." "You lied to me." The pen slipped from Vera's fingers and clattered onto the papers, a drop of ink splattering across the edge of the property division section. Her shoulders started shaking, but she didn't make a sound. After a long moment she lifted her head, eyes fully red, tears swimming, but she forced them back. "Marcus, I know I lied. But what good would the truth have done? If I told you I spent the night at my first love's place, with him crying and hugging me, and I cleaned up his apartment, would you have believed nothing happened? No, you would have imagined worse." Marcus watched her, something twisting in his chest. He wanted to speak, but his throat was clogged. Vera picked up the pen, wiped the nib with a tissue, and signed her name on the line. Vera's song, written with such pressure that the final stroke cut through the paper. She set the pen down. "You sign too." Marcus took the pen. The barrel still held the warmth of Vera's palm. He unscrewed the cap, his fingers twitching, the nib piercing a tiny hole in the character for marriage in the document's title. He took a breath and moved the pen to the signature line. His name came out quick and messy. He'd always had sloppy handwriting. Vera used to tease him, "Your handwriting is just like you, all over the place." But this time, after he finished, he stared at his signature for a long time. 3 crooked characters, like 3 people who couldn't stand straight. Vera stood. "I'll pack my things." "Don't bother." Marcus stood too. "I'll move. Your parents paid the down payment on this place. It's yours." Vera stood across the coffee table, the signed papers between them. A tear finally fell, landing on the document, blooming into a dark circle. She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand, brushing past the mole at the corner of her mouth. "Marcus, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." He cut her off. "Stay here. My office is far from here anyway, it's more convenient to move closer." Vera looked at him, tears streaming silently. Only her shoulders shook. Marcus walked past her into the bedroom, opened the closet, and started packing. T-shirts folded and stuffed into a duffel, pants rolled and tossed in, the gray windbreaker that had hung too long, a fine layer of dust on the shoulders. He brushed it off, folded it, packed it. Vera stood in the doorway, arms crossed, fingernails digging into her own arms. "Your stomach medication is on top of the fridge." "I know." "Your charger is in the nightstand drawer." "I know." "What about the cat? What if that cat comes back again?" Marcus's hands paused mid-fold. He thought of the orange cat, of Vera standing at the bulletin board wiping her eyes. He shoved the last sweater into the bag and zipped it shut. "It won't come back." Vera said nothing. Marcus walked out with the duffel, passing by her. He caught the scent of her hair, the lime shampoo they'd bought together on sale, 2 big bottles for $5. Her hair was still damp, the ends clinging to her neck. "Marcus." Vera's voice came from behind him. He stopped but didn't turn around. "Wait." She ran into the bathroom, and he heard the sound of a drawer opening, then she was back, pressing a blister pack of pills into his hand. "Your stomach meds. Take them with you." Marcus looked down at the pack, omeprazole, printed on the back. He realized the sticky note on the fridge with his name was already gone. He tucked the pills into his pocket and walked toward the door. As he bent to tie his shoes, he saw the ceramic bowl on the shoe cabinet holding his car keys. Next to it was Vera's jewelry box, lid half open, the ring engraved with MNV lying on the black velvet. He didn't take it. The door swung open, morning light pouring in, making him squint. He stepped out, and the door closed softly behind him, the lock clicking. He stood in the hallway, hearing a muffled cry from behind the door, short, like someone had clamped a hand over their mouth. He stood there gripping his duffel strap for a dozen seconds, then walked toward the elevator. In the elevator, he caught himself in the steel panels. More stubble now, the shadows under his eyes like someone had drawn them with ink. He touched the pills in his pocket, the aluminum foil pressing against his finger. When he stepped outside, the sun was high, the late July heat falling hard on his head. The plane trees were roaring with cicadas, hoarse and frantic. He crossed the lawn where the corgi was rolling again, white belly to the sky. He walked to the bus stop at the neighborhood entrance, thought for a moment, and hailed a taxi. The driver asked where to, and he named a hotel. The driver glanced at him in the rearview but didn't ask, just hit the gas. The hotel was on the west side of town, near his office. At check-in, he handed over his ID. The girl at the front desk asked how many nights. A week, for now. On the 12th floor, the room was small, a bed, a desk, a window looking out onto another building's glass curtain wall, glaring with reflected light. He dropped his duffel on the floor, sat on the edge of the bed, and pulled out his phone. Vera hadn't messaged. He opened their chat history. The last exchange was from yesterday morning. She'd said, "I'm going to work, might work late tonight," and he'd replied, "Okay, take care." This morning, she'd said, "Where did you go?" and he'd said, "Printing the papers." He tossed the phone onto the bed and lay back. The ceiling was white, clean, no cracks. He stared at that blank white for a long time, eyes aching, refusing to close. His phone buzzed. A message from Attorney Wong, * papers signed. "When are you going to the bureau, *?" He typed back, "This afternoon." Wong sent an OK hand emoji. Marcus tossed the phone aside and rolled to face the wall. A decorative print hung there, some sunflowers, too bright, their yellows clashing. He closed his eyes and saw Vera standing across the coffee table, tears falling onto the papers. He opened his eyes, sat up, and dialed Vera's number. It rang 4 times. She picked up. "Hello." Her voice was sandpaper. 2 p.m. at the Civil Affairs Bureau, Marcus said. "Bring your ID and household registry. I'll wait for you out front." Vera was silent for so long Marcus thought she'd hung up. "Okay," she finally said, and ended the call. Marcus listened to the dial tone, then set the phone down. He walked to the window, the glare from the glass tower across the street hitting him square in the face. Below was a narrow street lined with plane trees, someone riding an electric scooter with a case of bottled water strapped to the back. The cicadas were still going, their noise leaking through the window crack, buzzing, like the whole world had tinnitus. At noon, Marcus ate a bowl of wontons at a noodle shop downstairs from the hotel. The wontons were thick-skinned and understuffed, the broth thin with a few shreds of seaweed and dried shrimp. He finished half and put down his chopsticks, staring at the oil slick floating on top. He remembered the wontons Vera made. She'd mix a spoonful of oyster sauce into the filling, buy fresh wrappers from the hand-rolled stall at the market, chewier than the machine-made ones, they wouldn't fall apart when cooked. Every time, she'd drop an extra 2 in his bowl, saying, "You have a bad stomach, eat more carbs." He always left them, and she'd poke his forehead and say, "Such a waste." He looked at the half bowl in front of him, the broth cold now, oil congealed into patches. He scooped one up and put it in his mouth, cold, the meat tang rising. He swallowed anyway, stomach turning, but he finished the rest. When he paid, the owner handed him change. He pocketed it without counting. Outside, the sun was brutal. He walked the half-mile to the Civil Affairs Bureau, his t-shirt soaked through, clinging to his skin. 2 couples were taking wedding photos on the steps, the brides in white, the grooms in stiff-collared shirts, all smiling for the camera, the photographer calling out, "Closer, closer." Marcus stood at the bottom of the steps and watched. Last year he'd stood right there, Vera in a rented wedding dress, he in a rented suit, posing under the photographer's directions. When Vera laughed, her left dimple appeared, the mole at the corner of her mouth lifting with it. He'd thought she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. He checked his watch, 1:40. He moved to the shade of a tree at the side, leaning back against the trunk, the rough bark biting into his spine. At 1:50, a taxi pulled up. Vera got out, wearing the same white t-shirt and jean shorts, the same Birkenstocks with the heel imprint already worn in. She carried a file folder, her hair in a ponytail with loose strands sticking to her temples. She saw him, hesitated for a step, then walked over. Stopped about 3 feet away. Got your ID? Marcus asked. Vera pulled her ID from the folder and held it up for him. He glanced at it, her photo from 3 years ago, wearing dark clothes, hair tucked behind her ears, expression serious. Taken when they'd applied for their marriage license. Household registry. She produced that too, flipping it open. Her fingers trembled on the page turn. He noticed but said nothing. Let's go. He turned and walked up the steps. Vera followed, her sandals slapping against the stone. At the entrance, the two couples were still posing, the groom adjusting his bride's veil with slow, careful fingers. Marcus walked past them and pushed through the glass door. The lobby was air-conditioned to freezing, goosebumps rose on his arms. The ticket machine had a queue, a mix of people here to marry and people here to divorce. The divorce counter was on the left, 3 windows, the clerk in the middle flipping through paperwork. Marcus took a ticket, Divorce 017. He showed it to Vera. She looked at it briefly and closed her fist around the slip. They sat in the waiting area on plastic chairs, 1 seat between them. Vera placed the file folder on her lap, hands folded on top, nails pressing into the brown paper. Marcus leaned back, studying the marriage counseling poster on the wall, a cartoon couple holding hands, text reading, "Communication is the bridge of love." Marcus. Vera spoke suddenly. He turned to look at her. She was facing forward, her gaze on the grout lines between the floor tiles. In the future. She paused. Make sure you eat properly. Take your medicine on time. Don't drink too much coffee. Marcus didn't respond. I've taken down all the sticky notes on the fridge, she continued, her voice fading. You should rewrite them on your phone. Your seasonal clothes are in the top bin of the closet, spring and fall on the left, summer on the right, winter in the big box under the bed. If you don't want to come back for them, I can mail them to your office later. Don't bother, Marcus said. I don't want them. Vera's fingers stilled on the folder edge. She was silent for a few seconds, then nodded. Fine. The loudspeaker called, Divorce 015, please proceed to window 3. Marcus checked his number. He was 017. 2 more. The lobby door opened and a young couple walked in, the woman crying, the man stony-faced. They walked straight to the divorce counter, the woman wiping her tears as she went, the man striding ahead without looking back. They took number 016 and sat down across from Marcus and Vera. The woman started crying harder the moment she sat, shoulders heaving. The man pulled a tissue from his pocket and held it out. She wouldn't take it, so he placed it on her lap and turned away. Vera watched them, her lips parting slightly, saying nothing. Divorce 016, please proceed to window 3. The couple stood and walked to the counter. As the woman rose, the tissue fell to the floor. The man bent down, picked it up, and pressed it back into her hand. They walked away, the woman's shoulders still shaking. Marcus turned to Vera. Vera. She looked up. Is there anything else you want to say? He met her eyes. One last time. Vera's lips pressed tight, the mole dimpling in. Her eyes reddened again, but she sniffed and held it in. Would you believe me, no matter what I said? Marcus didn't answer. Vera looked down at her interlocked fingers on the folder. What if I told you I didn't go to Derek's last night? What if I told you I was knocked out in a supermarket parking lot and woke up in some place I didn't recognize? What if I told you that dress wasn't wrinkled by me, but by someone else, someone who stripped it off me? Marcus's fingers gripped the plastic armrest. What are you saying? Vera looked up, and the tears finally fell. She didn't wipe them, letting them stream down her cheeks and drip onto her white t-shirt collar, staining the fabric dark. I left work yesterday and went to the supermarket. I wanted to buy pork ribs for soup. In the underground parking lot, I was walking toward my car, and someone covered my mouth from behind. Her voice cracked, each word forced out like shards of glass. I fought back, I kicked him, but he was too strong. I woke up in a bed, under a blanket, and I couldn't remember anything. When I got up, my dress was wrinkled, my legs were bruised, and the back of my neck hurt like someone had clubbed me. Marcus released the armrest, leaning forward, almost standing. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Why didn't you call the police? Because I was scared. Vera's voice jumped, making a few people turn. She lowered it again, chest heaving. I was scared you'd think I was dirty. I was scared you'd find out someone had touched me and you wouldn't want me anymore. I'd rather you thought I cheated on you at Derek's place, I'd rather you hated me for being unfaithful, than have you know I was. She couldn't finish. She shot up, her chair scraping loud against the tiles, and stormed toward the exit, her sandals slapping fast and frantic. Marcus froze for half a second, then chased after her. He caught her wrist at the door. She tried to pull away, but he held on. Vera, stop. She stood with her back to him, shoulders heaving. The two couples from the wedding photos were coming in, carrying their dresses and suits, glancing at them with passing curiosity. Last night, Marcus said, gripping her wrist tighter, his voice dropping low, where were you really? Vera turned slowly. Her face was streaked with tears, but her eyes carried a recklessness, like someone with nothing left to lose. I don't know. I woke up in a room with the curtains drawn and the AC running. My phone was on the nightstand, my wallet was there, nothing missing from my bag. I couldn't find my shoes. I walked out of that room barefoot and found myself in an apartment complex. There were package lockers outside the main entrance. It took me over an hour to find a convenience store where I could borrow a phone to call a cab. Why didn't you call the police? Marcus asked again, his voice cracking. I told you, I was scared. The tears came again. I was scared you'd find out, scared the police would show up, scared everyone would know. I sat in that convenience store for over an hour, staring at my phone. Finally, I texted you saying working late, and I took a cab home. I thought about it the whole way, and I decided to tell you I went to Derek's. Why Derek? Because you know he's my first love. Because if I told you I went to his place, you wouldn't check. You wouldn't call him. You'd just get angry, you'd just be bothered, and she sniffed. You'd just sign. Marcus slowly released her wrist. His fingers dropped, brushing her hand. She flinched. There were faint red marks on the back of her hand, like someone had grabbed her. He hadn't noticed before. Marcus. Vera lifted her face to his, eyes swollen like walnuts. You asked if I had anything else to say. That's what I had to say. You can believe it or not. I've never done anything to betray you in my entire life. But if you can't stay with me because of this, I won't blame you. It's my fault, I shouldn't have gone to that parking lot alone at night. She turned and walked down the steps. The sun blazed on the back of her white t-shirt, the damp patch darker. Marcus stood on the steps, watching her reach the curb and hail a cab. As she bent to open the door, he saw a dark bruise on the back of her neck, purple-black in the sunlight, like it had been suctioned or squeezed hard. His mind went blank. He ran down the steps 3 at a time and grabbed the back door of the cab before it could close. Vera flinched, shrinking back inside. Get out, Marcus said. Vera stared at him, lips trembling. What? Get out of the cab. We're going to the hospital. I'm not going. Vera, get out right now. Marcus's voice had never been this sharp. The driver was watching in the rear view, wary. You have a bruise on the back of your neck. If everything you just said is true, you need to go to the hospital now, get examined, preserve evidence, then file a police report. Vera's tears came again, but this time she didn't refuse. She slowly stepped out of the car and stood before him, looking up. You believe me? Marcus looked at the bruise on her neck, her swollen eyes, the mole at the corner of her trembling mouth. He reached out and tucked her hair behind her ear, his fingertips brushing her earlobe, cold. First, the hospital, he said. The ER at the city hospital was always packed. Marcus led Vera through the waiting room, the smell of disinfectant sharp in their noses. Her hand was trembling in his, cold, her calloused fingertips rough against his palm. At registration, he went to emergency surgery. The nurse glanced at the bruise on Vera's neck, then at her red-rimmed eyes, and said nothing, just wrote up the orders. CT scan first, then gynecology. Vera's grip on Marcus's hand tightened at the word gynecology. He looked down at her. Her lips were white, her whole face drained of color. I'll be with you, he said. The CT was quick. The doctor said no obvious fracture, but soft tissue damage to the neck with subcutaneous bleeding. He pointed to a small shadow on the scan. This looks like a possible needle mark. Marcus leaned in. There it was, a faint ring near the cervical spine, edges irregular. Looks like something was injected, the doctor said. We should do blood work too. Vera sat on a small stool in the exam room, hands clasped on her knees, knuckles white. She stared at the patient information poster on the wall, reading it through once, then a second time. Marcus stood beside her, hand on her shoulder, feeling her shoulder blades hard as stone. The gynecology exam took longer. Before she went in, Vera looked back at him, a look like a cornered cat. Marcus nodded, and she went inside. He sat on the bench outside the gynecology department, waiting. Across from him sat a pregnant woman with a large belly, her husband peeling an apple beside her. The peel came off in one long ribbon, unbroken. The woman smiled as she touched her belly, that peaceful, contented smile. Marcus looked away, studying his old sneakers, one shoelace looser than the other. He bent down and retied the loose one, fingers clumsy, making 2 knots. About 40 minutes later, Vera emerged. Her face was even paler, lips cracked, clutching a slip of paper. She walked up to Marcus and handed it to him. He glanced at it. The medical jargon was mostly lost on him, but a few words were clear: minor vaginal abrasion, petechial bleeding at the cervix, soft tissue contusion of the external genitalia. His hand started shaking as he held the paper. Vera sat beside him, burying her face in her hands. She didn't sob, but her shoulders shook violently. Marcus folded the report and put it in his pocket, then pulled her into his side. She leaned against him, forehead to his collarbone, and soon a wet patch was spreading across his t-shirt. Marcus, her voice muffled against his chest, I don't want to go to the station. We have to. I don't want anyone to know. Vera. Marcus grabbed her shoulders and made her meet his eyes. This isn't your fault. What did you do wrong? You went to the supermarket after work and someone attacked you. That's not your fault. Vera's face was a mess of tears, her nose bright red. She sniffled. I'm scared they'll ask for details. Scared they'll make me talk about those images. She broke off, shaking again. Marcus pulled her back against him, his hand rubbing her back in slow strokes. I'll be right there with you. If you can't answer something, I'll do it for you. Just nod or shake your head. Vera nodded against his chest. On the way to the station, they took a cab. Vera leaned against the back seat window, watching the city scroll by, plane trees blurring into green streaks. She spoke suddenly, Marcus, are we still getting divorced? Marcus looked at her profile. Sunlight streamed through the window, the tear tracks on her face now dried into faint lines. The mole at the corner of her mouth looked like a brown dot in this light. There was still a sheen of tears on her lashes. "No," he said. "I tore up the papers." The corner of Vera's mouth twitched, like she was trying to smile but couldn't. "When?" "While you were in gynecology. I tore them up out here." Marcus pulled a handful of shredded paper from his pocket, fragments still showing the words, "divorce agreement." "Then I flushed them down the toilet." Vera finally laughed. It was a tiny laugh, the mole at her mouth lifting, her left dimple flickering for a second. Then she cried again, laughing and crying at the same time, tears falling while her mouth curved up. At the station, they took her statement. Vera recounted everything in fragments: the supermarket, the parking lot, waking up on a strange bed. The female officer brought her hot water, which Vera held for warmth, the steam fogging her face. Marcus sat beside her the whole time, stepping in whenever she got stuck on details. He described the state of her clothes, the bruise, the needle mark on her neck. The officer took notes, then showed Vera a scene report. "We found the apartment complex. Surveillance caught the suspect's back, but his face was covered with a mask and cap." "Can you remember anything distinctive about him?" Vera thought for a long time, cradling her cup. "He had a scar on his hand. When I woke up, my bag was on the nightstand. He must have moved it. I opened my eyes just enough to see him reaching for it. There was a scar on the back of his hand, from his index finger to his wrist. Long, like he'd been cut." The officer wrote it down. "Anything else?" The smell." Vera closed her eyes. "Not cologne. It was like oil from a repair shop, mixed with sweat. Very strong." Marcus listened, his fingers slowly tightening on his knees. Every detail his wife was describing felt like a blow to his chest. How much did it hurt her to remember these things? When the statement was done, the officer gave them her contact information and said she'd update them on progress. As they were leaving, she put a hand on Vera's shoulder. "You did nothing wrong, miss. Stay strong. We'll handle the rest." Vera nodded, eyes red again. It was evening when they left the station. The sunset painted the whole street orange, the shadows of the roadside trees stretching long across the pavement like bars. Vera walked beside Marcus, slowly. Her sandals slapped against the brick, and he matched her pace, the two of them moving through the fading light. "Marcus," Vera said suddenly. "I want wontons." "Okay. You make them." "Okay. No dried shrimp." "Got it. Extra seaweed." "Fine." Vera said nothing more. As they walked, she reached over, her little finger hooking around his. Marcus's hand stiffened, then slowly, finger by finger, he wrapped his hand around hers. Her hand was still cold, but warmer than it had been that morning. He held her fingers as they walked, neither speaking. By the time their cab pulled up to their neighborhood, the sky was dark. The streetlights were on, circles of yellow light pooling on the sidewalk. Marcus paid the driver and helped Vera out. As they approached the building entrance, he stopped. There was an orange cat crouched at the door. Thin, with the tip of its tail missing, licking its front paws. When it saw them, the cat looked up, amber eyes catching the streetlight. Vera stopped. Slowly, she crouched down and held out her hand. The cat hesitated, then walked over and rubbed its head against her fingers. Marcus stood behind her, watching her crouch there, petting the cat. The last glow of sunset filtered through the buildings, hitting her profile, elongating her lashes. She made soft sounds as she petted it, maybe a name she'd given it before. It came back. Vera looked up at him, eyes bright. "Marcus, it really came back." Marcus crouched down too and touched the cat's back. Its fur was rough, its spine bony against his palm. The cat sniffed his fingers, then settled against his leg, tail curling around him. "Let's go home." Marcus stood and pulled out his keys. As the lock turned, Marcus glanced at Vera. She was lifting the cat into her arms, the animal curling into a ball against her chest, purring loudly. She caught his eye, and the mole at her mouth lifted. "Wontons," she said. "Cooking." He pushed the door open. The entryway light was on, a warm yellow glow that fused their shadows together on the ground behind them. The wontons were still in the fridge. As Marcus boiled water, Vera leaned against the kitchen doorframe, holding the cat, watching him clumsily drop the wontons into the pot. Some hot water splashed his wrist, he hissed and shook it off. "Clumsy," Vera said. "Then you cook, if you're so skilled." "My hand is injured." Vera held up her left hand, a bandage around her wrist from the hospital, covering the needle mark from her blood draw. "You're abusing the wounded." Marcus looked back at her. She was tilted to the side, the cat in her arms yawning. The kitchen light bathed her in warmth, her hair catching soft glints. He turned back to the pot, the corner of his mouth lifting. The water boiled, and the wontons rose one by one, their white bellies bobbing. Seaweed and dried shrimp swirled in the broth. Marcus remembered she'd said no dried shrimp, but he'd already thrown them in. He fished them out one by one with a spoon. Vera laughed behind him. "Idiot. Shut up. I want the shrimp now." Marcus turned to glare at her. She was doubled over laughing, the cat still in her arms. Outside, the cicadas were still buzzing, the late July night thick with heat. But in the kitchen, there was only the gentle bubble of the soup pot and their two overlapping breaths. He served 2 bowls and brought them to the table. Vera set the cat down and sat across from him. She scooped up a wonton, blew on it, took a bite, and let out an approving words muffled. "So good. That's your filling. So compliment me." Marcus ate his wontons without responding. But as the steam rose in his face, something bright flickered in his eyes, and he blinked it away quickly. Vera saw. She said nothing, just scooped 2 extra wontons from her bowl into his. "I can't finish them," she said. Marcus looked at the 2 extra wontons in his bowl, picked them up with his chopsticks, and ate them. The skin was chewy, the filling savory, the oyster sauce blooming on his tongue. He remembered so many things. The first time she'd made him wontons, it was too salty, he'd eaten 2 bowls and drunk 2 bottles of water, and she'd crouched in front of him saying, "Just yell at me," and he'd said, "Half a spoon less salt next time." The next time she'd added less, and it was perfect. The time after, she'd forgotten again, and it was salty. After so many attempts, she'd finally gotten the ratio right. Every batch since had tasted exactly like this. He'd been eating her wontons for 3 years. He'd probably eat them for many more. The cat had climbed onto a chair and sat there licking its paws. Vera reached over to pet its head. It squinted, purring like a motor. "Let's name it," Vera said. "Like what?" "Returns." Vera looked at the cat. "It always runs, but it always comes back. Let's call it Returns." Marcus looked at the orange cat. It opened its eyes, amber pupils reflecting the warm lamp above the table. "Fine," he said. "Returns." That night, Marcus didn't go back to the hotel. He slept on the living room couch. Vera slept in the bedroom. The door was open, and he could hear her shifting in bed, the faint creak of springs. Once in the middle of the night, he woke to the sound of her steady breathing from the bedroom, soft, peaceful. He rolled over. The cat, Returns, lay on the floor beside the couch, tail swishing. The streetlight came through the window, cutting the same warm trapezoid across the floor as it had the night before. But it wasn't the same. He closed his eyes and finally fell into a deep sleep. In his dream, Vera was standing on the steps of the Civil Affairs Bureau in her white dress, laughing, the left dimple holding the July sunlight. When he woke the next morning, a blanket was over him. Blue plaid, matching the pattern of Vera's apron. On the coffee table was a sticky note in her round handwriting, every O, perfectly circular. Asterisk, I went to the station. The officer said surveillance found new leads. Wontons are warm in the pot. Don't drink coffee. The cat has been fed, it ate half a sausage. Asterisk. Marcus held the note for a long time. Then he went to the kitchen, lifted the lid, and the wonton soup was still warm. He served himself a bowl and sat at the table to eat it slowly. Outside, the late July sun was rising again. The plane tree leaves turned their silver backs in the breeze, and the cicadas started their hoarse chorus from all directions. He finished his wontons, washed the bowl, then picked up his phone and texted Vera, asterisk done with breakfast. Coming back now. What do you want for dinner? I'll get groceries, asterisk. She replied quickly, asterisk pork ribs. Soup, asterisk. He answered, okay. Then he put on his shoes, picked up his keys, and went out. At the neighborhood entrance, he looked back at the plane tree. The leaves were thick and dense, hiding half the sky. Sunlight slipped through the gaps, scattering gold across the pavement. He turned and walked into the July morning. A week later, the station called. Marcus was in a meeting when his phone buzzed. He saw Officer Lin's number and his heart skipped. He excused himself and stepped out to the stairwell, the emergency exit, where he took the call. Mr. Chin, we've made an arrest. Officer Lin's voice carried barely contained excitement. The surveillance footage matched, fingerprints confirmed. We found he had a prior record, a similar case in another district last year. He was out on bail. If you and your wife are available tomorrow morning, we'd like to do a formal ID. Marcus's hand shook around the phone. He leaned against the concrete wall, the cool surface seeping through his shirt. Does she need to be there? Preferably. But if she's not emotionally ready, we can arrange remote identification. We'll check her preference first. Marcus hung up and stood there taking deep breaths. The stairwell was lit by dim emergency lights, greenish, his shadow stretched long across the railings. He dialed Vera. It rang 4 times before she picked up, her voice light, hello? Are you done with your meeting? The station called. A few seconds of silence. Then Vera's voice dropped, steady. They caught him. Yeah. Tomorrow morning for the ID. Can you go? Another pause. Marcus heard her let out a slow breath. I'll go. I'll be with you. I know. After hanging up, Marcus stayed in the stairwell a little longer. He pulled out his pack of cigarettes, lit one, the smoke spiraling into the ventilation shaft under the green light. He took 2 drags and stubbed it out, tossing the butt in the trash, waving away the smoke. When he returned to the meeting, a colleague asked if everything was okay. Fine, just some family stuff, he said, and sat back down. But on his notepad, he'd scrawled, station tomorrow morning, over and over, the handwriting so messy even he couldn't read it. That evening, Marcus came home to find Vera on the couch watching TV, returns curled in her lap. She'd changed into a clean cotton nightgown, her hair down and still damp from a shower. She looked up when he came in, the mole at her mouth twitching. You're back, she said. Yeah. Marcus changed shoes and sat beside her. Did you eat? Yeah. I left yours in the microwave. Marcus nodded but didn't get up to heat it. He sat beside her, the orange cat sleeping between them on its back, white belly exposed. Tomorrow, Vera said first, will you come in with me? Yes. Will I have to see his face? Maybe. The officer said you can do remote or in person. Whatever you're comfortable with. Vera's fingers stroked the cat's belly, returns kicked in its sleep. I want to see his face, she said. I want to remember what he looks like. So if I ever see him on the street, I know to stay away. Marcus turned to look at her. In the bluish glow of the TV, her profile was unusually calm. A thin line had appeared beside the mole at her mouth, new, deepening when she pressed her lips together. Okay, he said. I'll watch with you. The next morning, they arrived at the station on time. Vera wore a long-sleeved blouse with the cuffs rolled to mid-forearm, the bandage on her wrist replaced with a small bandage over the needle mark. She'd put on light makeup and a hint of lipstick, looking better than she had in days. Officer Lin met them at the entrance and led them through the corridor to the ID room. It had a one-way glass wall looking into another room lit by fluorescent lights, currently empty. The suspect will be brought in shortly. Please have a seat. Officer Lin gestured to the chairs. Ms. Song, when the person comes in, he'll stand in that room. You don't need to speak. Just watch and tell us if you recognize him. Vera nodded, clasping her hands on her knees. Marcus sat beside her, reaching over to cover her hand. Hers was cold but steady, no trembling. After a few minutes, the door across from the glass opened. A man was led in by officers, handcuffed, wearing a gray short-sleeved shirt, his head shaved, high cheekbones, a scar at the corner of his mouth. He stood in the center, head down, face hidden. One of the officers said something, and the man looked up, directly at the one-way glass. Vera's fingers clamped down on Marcus's hand. She stared at the man's face, her breathing quickening. He looked about 30, small eyes, a few freckles on his nose, and a patch of stubble on his chin. He glanced around, his gaze passing over the one-way glass, and Vera flinched. That's him. Her voice barely escaped between clenched teeth. He was wearing that gray shirt that night. When he looked down at me, that was the face. Marcus felt her hand shaking violently. He pulled her close, pressing her face into his chest. That's enough. You've seen him. That's enough. Vera trembled against him, but she didn't cry. Just shook, teeth chattering like she was freezing. Marcus wrapped his jacket around her and nodded to Officer Lin. She identifies him. Officer Lin made quick notes, then signaled for the suspect to be removed. When the door closed, the ID room was left with just the three of them. Ms. Song, Officer Lin said, crouching down to Vera's level, you did great. Really great. We'll proceed with legal proceedings from here. You may need to testify in court, but we'll notify you in advance and arrange counseling. For now, go home and rest. Vera lifted her head from Marcus's chest, her eyes red but dry. She sniffed and nodded at the officer. Thank you. Outside the station, the sun was blinding. Vera squinted, shading her eyes. She stood on the steps and took a long, deep breath, then let it out slowly. Marcus. Yeah. When I saw him just now, I thought I'd be scared enough to run out. But you stayed. I stayed. Vera turned to look at him. In the sunlight, her pupils contracted into small amber dots. He didn't scare me anymore. That night, when he had me pinned against the car, I thought the whole world was ending. But just now, standing in that room with the cuffs on, looking down, he was just one person. Just one person. And I've been scared of him for all these days. Marcus took her hand. You don't have to be scared anymore. Vera looked at him, the mole at her mouth slowly lifting, the left dimple showing faintly. Yeah. They walked down the steps and along the sidewalk. Passing a flower shop, Vera stopped, looking at the bucket of sunflowers outside. Their bright yellow petals glowed in the sun. Buy one, Marcus said. Vera shook her head. Buy a bunch. Put them in the living room. Marcus went in and bought a bundle of 10 sunflowers, wrapped in craft paper with a twine bow. Vera took them, burying her face in them to smell, the petals brushing her nose and leaving a smear of yellow pollen. Marcus reached out and wiped the pollen off her nose. As his fingertip brushed over her skin, she squinted, cat-like. Another week passed, and the case moved into formal investigation. Vera made a supplementary statement at the prosecutor's office. She came home pale but more composed than before. She sat on the couch drinking water, returns in her lap, slowly rubbing his ears. The prosecutor said the evidence chain looks solid, she reported. Parking lot surveillance caught him approaching me from behind, the apartment complex cameras showed him carrying someone into the building, and the scar on his hand matches what I described. He confessed. Marcus brought her a bowl of sweet soup and set it before her. So it's basically settled. Pretty much. Waiting for the court to set a date. Vera spooned some soup, blew on it. His case from last year hasn't been sentenced yet, but with mine added on, multiple counts, shouldn't be light. She went back to sipping her soup. Marcus sat in the armchair watching her. She drank slowly, carefully, the spoon clicking against the bowl. Return stretched in her lap, paws batting at her nightgown hem. Life gradually returned to normal. Marcus made breakfast every morning before work, fried eggs, wontons, or porridge, and called Vera to get up. She'd come to the table, usually with Returns already claiming a chair beside her, waiting for handouts. She'd scroll through her phone while eating, occasionally chatting about work plans. They didn't mention that day anymore, and neither brought up the divorce. But some things had changed. Vera no longer went to the underground parking lot alone. She'd wait at her office entrance for Marcus to pick her up. Occasionally she'd wake in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, and Marcus, hearing the commotion from the couch, would go to the bedroom door. If it was open, she'd beckon him in. He'd sit on the edge of the bed, holding her hand until her breathing steadied, then return to the couch. Marcus hadn't moved back into the bedroom. Vera hadn't asked. A small side table by the couch held his laptop and a half-finished novel. Return slept sometimes on the couch's footpad, sometimes sneaking into the bedroom to jump on Vera's bed. He was getting fat now, that orange cat gene kicking in, belly round as a pumpkin. The late July heat finally broke in mid-August. One night of rain brought autumn into the morning air, cooler, carrying the scent of wet earth and leaves. On a Saturday, Marcus was on the balcony hanging laundry. Vera was in the living room, humming as she mopped, the mop bumping against the coffee table legs while Returns chased the mop head. Sunlight streamed through the sliding door, flooding the floor with gold. Marcus's phone rang. He wiped his hands and went inside to answer, an unfamiliar number. He said hello, and after 2 seconds of silence, a man's voice came through, hoarse and thick with congestion. Marcus, this is Derek Joe. Marcus stepped to the balcony door, closing it behind him. Vera was still humming in the living room, the mop scraping the floor. She hadn't noticed. Something I can help you with? Marcus asked. Derek sniffled on the other end. I'm calling to apologize. That call I made to you that morning, I had no idea what had really happened. Later, when my girlfriend told me the whole story, I realized, Marcus, I had no idea Vera went through that. I was back in my hometown that day, my dad was in surgery, I was losing my mind. I called you without thinking. I didn't explain myself clearly, Stop, Marcus said. I know. Derek paused. Is she okay? Marcus glanced back into the living room. Vera was on her knees wiping under the coffee table, Returns darting between her arms. She laughed, showing her left dimple. She's fine, Marcus said. Getting better. Derek let out a relieved breath. Good. That's good. Marcus, nothing ever happened between me and her, not since high school. That day when she called me, I didn't pick up, my phone was on silent. My girlfriend, ex-girlfriend now, she saw the missed calls in my phone and assumed something was going on. But there was nothing. I know, Marcus said flatly. She told me. And also, Derek stumbled. What I said in that call, about her coming back to be with me, I was drunk. My dad was in the ICU, I was a wreck. I'm sober now. I know she has a family. I won't, Marcus, believe me, I won't. I believe you. Marcus said. How's your father? Derek was quiet for a moment, then his voice dropped. He had surgery. Still in the ICU. The doctors say if he can make it through this week, he'll be okay. I'm staying at the hospital every day. Take care of yourself. Yeah. Thank you, Marcus. And tell Vera, tell her thanks too. I will. Marcus hung up and stood on the balcony a moment longer. The breeze carried the scent of damp leaves. Downstairs, the corgi was rolling on the lawn, coming up with wet grass clinging to its fur. Marcus took a breath and went back inside. Vera straightened up, wiping sweat from her forehead, the mop planted like a staff. Who was that? Marcus looked at her, her forehead hair matted with sweat, nose shining, the mole at her mouth faintly parted with her breathing. Derek. Vera paused, then said, "Oh," and went back to mopping. As she pushed the mop forward, she added, "What did he say?" Apologized. And about his dad? How is his dad? Still in the ICU. They don't know yet. Vera dipped the mop in the bucket and wrung it out. His dad was good to me. When I used to go to their place to study, Mr. Zhou would make me sweet boiled eggs. Her voice trailed off. Hope he makes it. Marcus walked over and took the mop from her. I'll finish this. Go sit down. Vera didn't argue, settling onto the couch with returns. She watched Marcus bend to mop, then suddenly said, "Marcus, when you told me you tore up the papers, were you lying or telling the truth?" Marcus stopped mid-mop and turned back. The truth. I still have the pieces in my desk drawer. Want to see? No. Vera buried her face in Returns' belly, voice muffled. Why do you keep them? To remind myself not to be so impulsive. Vera lifted her face from the cat's belly, the mole at her mouth lifting. So will you be impulsive again? Marcus thought about it. Hopefully not. Then when are you moving back into the bedroom? The room went quiet. A drip of water fell from the mop onto the floor, a soft plop. Marcus straightened and turned to face her. Vera sat on the couch with the cat, tilted her head, eyes bright with a hint of a smile. Tonight, he said. Vera raised the cat to cover her face. Returns let out an innocent mew. Marcus laughed and went back to mopping. The mop pushed out and pulled back, water lines curving across the floor. A crack in the window let in a breeze that puffed the curtains. The late July air had cooled, mingling with the last cicada cries from the grass below, like summer saying goodbye. In September, the court summons arrived. Vera held the paper for a long time, reading through the date and case number neatly printed. She flipped it over, then back, and tucked it into a book on the highest shelf. The 15th of next month, she said over dinner. Will you be free that day? Yeah, I'll take time off. Vera chewed a mouthful of greens, slow, taking a long time to swallow. I'm scared I'll start shaking when I see him in court. Shake then, Marcus said, adding a piece of ribs to her bowl. I'll be sitting right next to you. Just hold my hand. Vera ducked her head over her bowl, the rim hiding half her face. Only her lashes were visible, trembling slightly in the lamplight. The court date was overcast, clouds hanging low, but it didn't rain. Marcus wore a dark jacket, Vera wore a plain white blouse and black trousers, her hair pulled back neatly. They arrived early, waiting outside the courthouse. Vera held Marcus's hand, her palm sweating. Inside, they sat in the front row of the gallery. Vera sat straight-backed, an inch off the chair's back, like a drawn bowstring. Marcus glanced at her, her jaw tight, the mole at her mouth dimpled, lips white. When the suspect was brought in, Vera's fingers dug into the back of Marcus's hand. He didn't pull away, he wrapped his other hand around hers and held tight. The trial lasted over 2 hours. The prosecutor presented evidence, surveillance screenshots, medical reports, the suspect's confession, page after page. Vera sat through it all, flinching when her name was read but never looking away. She stared at the gray-shirted man in the defendant's box, at his handcuffed hands, at the scar running from his index finger to his wrist. When the judge announced the sentence, Vera's hand slowly relaxed around Marcus's fingers. She let out a long breath, as if something lodged in her chest had finally come loose. Stepping out of the courthouse, the overcast sky cracked open, a beam of sunlight breaking through the clouds to hit the puddle on the steps, making it glitter. Vera stood on the steps, lifting her face to the light. Marcus. Yeah. It's over. Yeah. She turned to look at him, the mole at her mouth lifting slowly, the dimple appearing, her eyes curving into crescents. I'm hungry. What do you want? Hot pot. In the middle of the day. I want hot pot. Marcus looked at her laughing face and felt a weight lift from his chest. He smiled too. Fine. Hot pot. They walked along the street by the courthouse for a few blocks and found a hot pot place still open for lunch. The restaurant was empty, the owner gave them a window table. Vera ordered an entire feast, tripe, beef aorta, duck blood, luncheon meat, piling up like a mountain. When the broth boiled, she plunged the tripe in, counted to 7, fished it out, and ate it while hissing with the heat. Slow down, Marcus said, pouring her plum soda. Nobody's taking it from you. I'm just hungry, Vera said, mouth full of duck blood. Haven't eaten properly in days. I was too nervous before the trial. And now? I could eat a whole cow. She laughed, reaching for another slice of luncheon meat. The steam from the pot rose up and blurred her face, but Marcus could see her curved eyes and the mole at her smiling mouth through the white haze. When they finished, it was past 2 in the afternoon. The sun had fully emerged from the clouds, September's light gentler than July's harsh blaze, warm on their skin. They strolled along the river, the willows still green but their edges beginning to turn yellow. Vera kicked a pebble as she walked, it skipped into the water with a soft plop. Marcus, I want to learn to drive. I thought you didn't want to. Because I had you to drive. She shoved her hands into her jacket pockets, steps lighter now. But I want to learn for myself. So if I need to go to the supermarket at night, I don't have to make you pick me up. Marcus looked at her profile, sunlit, a stripe of light across her nose. Fine. I'll sign you up. You teach me. I have no patience for teaching. Hire an instructor. Then come with me. Yeah, I'll come with you. Vera nodded, satisfied, her steps even lighter. After a few strides, she stopped and turned back to face him. The autumn breeze off the river lifted strands of her hair across her face. Marcus. Yeah. Thank you for not leaving. Marcus stood a few paces away, looking at her. The September sky was clear and deep, sunlight filtering through the willow branches and scattering gold across her. She stood there, eyes bright, the mole at her mouth slightly lifted by the breeze. He stepped closer, brushing the loose hair from her face, his fingertips sliding along her temple and coming to rest on her shoulder. He looked down into her eyes, pale amber, his reflection now standing steady, no longer the crooked paper doll. "I should thank you too," he said. "You didn't leave either." Vera's dimple appeared again, brighter than the sunlight. She reached up and caught his fingers on her shoulder, one by one, threading them through her own, holding tight. The willow branches brushed their shoulders as the river's ripples spread in widening circles. In the distance, someone was walking a corgi, its wagging but bouncing across the lawn. The cicadas were sparse now, one occasional long note, as if saying goodbye to summer. They walked hand in hand along the riverbank, their shadows trailing behind them, merging into one in the autumn sun. "Let's get ribs on the way back," Vera said. "Okay." "For soup." "Okay." "Extra corn." "Got it." "Returns needs a bath. He crawled under the bed last week and got all dusty. We'll wash him when we get home. You do it or me. Together." Vera shot him a look, but he kept walking, expression unreadable. Her lips pressed together, holding it in for 2 seconds, then she broke, laughing. The mole at her mouth lifted high, the dimple filling with 3 o'clock sunlight. The river breeze swept past them, carrying the damp smell of water and earth. September's light was still long, the sun hanging on, casting their shadows ever longer, 2 lines running side by side, stretching forward into the unseen distance.